The chassis and the engine, electronics, cooling system, fuel system, chassis, everything on the working car is now essentially complete. So the next step is to start working on the body. Over here you can see I've got a model of my original, you might say, concept for the vehicle, made out of clay. And I'm putting it next to the vehicle now so you can see the similarities and the differences. Couple of things. First off, if you look at the front wheel and how it's oriented to the headlights, I'll square it up here so you can see. You can see on the clay concept model, the tires are actually quite a bit ahead of where the headlights are, but on the actual car, I was confined to bringing up the headlights a little further so I could get them down lower. It's essentially right where the front wheels, I should say the tires, is considerably different than that. So that means this changes to about there, okay? Which does change the look of the car. The front end sticks out further. The other proportion going back and forth is where you look at where the roll bar comes up compared to the rear tire. That there is a lot more distance between that roll bar and the rear tire than there is on the model. So that means the tire needs to go back to about there. That gives you a very different looking car. And then the big one. When you look at the way the vehicle is proportioned, it is much, much lower than the original concept. It's about 9 inches lower. 9 inches, that's a lot. That is a lot. I have enough changes that happen along the way of, building a real car, that now the concept needs some significant adjustments to be a guide for me for the body. So it looks like, and I'm not relishing this, I'm going to have to re-sculpt the clay model. So how will this look once the body's on? Well, something like this. Here is the exterior design version 2. I'm preparing the chassis to start on the bodywork. So as you can see here, I'm wrapping everything up and getting everything closed in because this is going to be a very messy step. You can see here at the back, I have completely enclosed the rear subframe with the engine and transmission and chain and electronics and all that, because that would be a real mess to clean up. Completely enclosed in plastic. You can see up here as well in the front, I've got a bag over the steering wheel, over all the electronics up here, the brakes. I have completely enclosed the pedal assembly in plastic, as well as underneath. You can see that, you can see underneath here, but everything is enclosed. Gas pedal too. I've got my hard points all set. Back here, I've got my exhausts exiting through the rear at the center. I've got my taillights attached solidly. And one of the things I did on this is I know I'm going to have to pull off the tail light hard point, if you will, once I'm finished with the body and to pull it off. So you'll see the way I've got it attached is with 2 rivets, and they are accessible. So once I pull this off, I can get in there, drill those out, and those will come off with the body. Similar fashion, one of the major hard points here and where a lot of the body flows from is from the headlights. So those are all taped off and ready to go for the mess. But these are attached, the headlights are actually attached to the chassis. If you look real carefully, there's a aluminum bracket, and then underneath you'll see a washer. Now those are actually riveted to the chassis, and what's between the bracket and the chassis is something called a rivet washer. A rivet washer is like a regular bolt washer, except they're made of aluminum. So I've done that so I can easily get in there with a hacksaw and cut through that aluminum washer, and it's an aluminum rivet as well. So those will come off very easily. So that will, the headlight bucket as you see it, will come off with the body. The chassis is now ready to apply the pink foam and start sculpting the body. I put this wooden armature on top of it to give the foam something to stick to, so I have a nice solid base. The last thing I wanted to happen during my body shaping part of this project is for the foam to start coming loose or it start moving around on me. So I built a fairly sturdy plywood base on which to start. You can see it's been cut in to fit. And I used a stitch method with thin wire, as you can see right here, to hold the panels together. I really wanted a minimum number of attachment points directly to the chassis, so nearly all these stitch points are where the plywood stitches together. Part of this phase of the project is trying to think about 4 steps ahead. In other words, you put down a solid foundation of this plywood to attach the foam to, but you need to be thinking a little bit further down the road, like, I don't want to use any more foam than I have to, but I want to make sure I've got plenty of room so while I'm sculpting, I don't run into the plywood. So you cut back on the plywood and give yourself a little bit of space for that. The next step after that you really need to think about is, once I finish sculpting this body and fiberglassing it in place, I'm going to need to pull it off to get all that foam off. So as I'm doing this, I'm thinking very closely about how am I going to slip this thing off? And that's why the stitch points are just from panel to panel and very few to the body, to the chassis. And the ones that do go to the chassis are in places that I'll be able to access once the fiberglass body is on. For example, if you look down inside here, you will see there's one place where the wire actually attaches to the chassis, and I can get to this through the cockpit. And there's some more down there, so I can get to those. You'll also see that I've got these blocks that attach to the plywood panels. These blocks hold out the panel so it is plumb. So I can be able to slip this body off, assuming that the foam doesn't curve under the plywood panels too much. Now the way I made these brackets is I've got a piece of the pink foam glued to a little piece of plywood standoff, and then the foam block is glued to the plywood panel. So really, there really is no wood to wood attachment. It's wood to foam and foam to wood. And the thinking here is when I get ready to pull off this body with all the foam and fiberglass on it, it'll be very easy to simply take off those wires and knock that piece of foam off, and the the little plywood brace there will come off with it. So all these panels, I've put a level against them to ensure that they don't undercut, that they are plumb or they are narrower at the top than at the bottom, so they pull off. And that includes the rear. As you can see, I've enclosed that as well. Fully enclosed in plastic and ready to start attaching the foam.